welcome to the Desire and Dharma series. My name is Yael Shai, and I am here with my longtime friend. I think maybe 20 years, and maybe less than that, but a long time. The wonderful and wise, brilliant Koshin Paley Ellison, who is an author, a Zen teacher, a Jungian psychotherapist, leader in contemplative care, co-founder of the educational nonprofit New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care, author of many books, including one of my absolute favorites, Untangled, which is a book about the Eightfold Path told with like real vulnerability. We were talking about this before we jumped on. Vulnerability, like insight, funny, all the things that Koshin is. Beautiful, beautiful book. And I'm excited to get into it with you, Koshin. Thank you
Let's
for
do
being
it.
here. So, one of the things I wanted to explore with you is this kind of complicated relationship in the Dharma or in Buddhism, where we are taught to think about, to see desire in very different ways, almost like it needs two different names
Mm,
because there is the kind of desire in our life that really leads to suffering that we all know something about, where it's grasping, it's wanting, it's never feeling like the things that we're after are satisfying, and yet the constant need for more and better.
mm,
um, and then we also have this kind of maybe less discussed less clear area that is all about the deeper longings, like the deeper wants that have us reach outwards for love, for belonging, for creativity, for output in the world, for engagement. And how do we differentiate between the two? And any kind of thoughts to get us started on how we work with this complicated emotion?
mm, mm. To me, I'm not sure at this moment that desire is necessarily an emotion, but for me, what I think about, I have the pleasure of being a disciple of a teacher named Genyo Kojima Roshi, and he is a Soto Zen teacher in Japan. And one of the things that I love about his teaching is that there's a clarity around that to live an ethical life, half of it has to be atonement. We have to be, at least half of our life has to be taking responsibility. And to me, I always often think of it, his teaching to be about really becoming an adult. And it does not mean to not have desire. And desire is often misunderstood because, as we were talking about before, is that to desire the Buddha Dharma is also central. To desire to feel our suffering in our life. I was talking to someone earlier today who we were sharing about the what's it like to feel that our life is basically being lived through this reenactment of our basic pattern of suffering and the reenactment of the suffering? And how do we learn how to stop and pause and trust our wisdom and our compassion more than just automatic behavior,
Mm.
right? To learn how to pause and come back to the posture of sitting and feeling the ground, feeling the softness in our lower belly, opening our shoulders, being upright in our body and mind, and say, like, wait a second. I know I want that new iPhone, or I know that I desire to feel differently than I'm feeling, or I wish the world was different than it is, or I wish that I had a different apartment or whatever. Is that really important?
Mm,
And where is this coming from? So, like, learning to ground ourselves and to realize, like, oh, in this point in my life, is that actually important? Is it wise to be thinking this way? And Dogen Zenji, the founder of Soto Zen in Japan, about 800 years ago, would often teach about, like, what does it mean to actually be time? So, like, at this time in my life, is that what's needed?
mm,
Maybe ice cream, and or whatever that is, So, like, what is it? So, are we actually in time? I find I often we just came back from being in Mexico. Like, there's many things like for sale and many things and beautiful markets and things like that. But we don't actually need anything. But it's wonderful to enjoy seeing things. So
mm,
having the pleasure and of the desire to be able to look at things, like I could feel with certain things like, oh, I want that. But like it's so easy at this point to be able to say, like, I don't need it though.
mm,
And the difference between wanting and needing, and they can be good friends.
mm.
And like learning to be like, and having a sense of humor also is very helpful to like realize, like, oh yeah, I really need that. Really?
Yeah.
And so to really atone, like my teacher often says, like that to really take responsibility is that every moment can be a moment of practice. So, like walking through a beautiful market can be a beautiful practice of learning to have sensual experience. So, you don't have to cut off your sense of your sensual nature because we are sensual beings, but it doesn't mean we have to possess things, right? And for me, that is a very important difference. And I remember I was describing to this person this morning about they were sharing about the chaos that they grew up in, and that they find that they're still employing that chaotic mind to everything. And how do we learn how to stop
Mm,
and really reflect so that we can do something new? And
mm.
stop externalizing only. So of course we live in an internal and external world, but many of us, I know, including myself, we can get caught in just externalizing and needing and wanting and like, give me, give me, give me.
Yes.
Uh, to me, it's also about, I was sharing with them the story of Angulimala, who is that um, became a disciple of the Buddha, but before that had been a disciple of another teacher who he loved very much, and the teacher loved him. And as often is the case in those scenarios, all the other people, the students were very jealous of this relationship. And when the teacher went away, the students tricked him and said, oh, you must do, your teacher wants you to make a mala for him, which is one of those 108 bead things that you see people wearing,
Like a necklace.
and like a necklace, or some people wrap it
Mm.
on their wrist, and it had to be made out of one finger from each person, so 108 uh, fingers. So you had to murder 108 people. And he was very devastated by this. But what was missing, so if we think about the desire to please, it's a very like kind of amplified story of the desire to please. So he really wanted to please his teacher, but the desire to please the teacher overrode, or we could say spiritually bypassed his own wisdom and be like, wait a second, that's insane. I don't want to do that. That's not my desire. But the desire to please overrode his own wisdom and compassion,
Mm,
which is devastating and what happens to all of us, right? When we don't listen to our wisdom and compassion, when we don't ground ourselves and we just have the desire alone, there's can be also no atonement. There's no reconciliation. And so he goes and kills 100, and some of the stories say 107 people. So he became a mass murderer,
mm,
had his garland, his mala of fingers, pretty gruesome. And I feel like the story is so amplified because it's like we have to really hear it. Like in many things, if it's too subtle, we don't hear it. But if we can really appreciate, my goodness, we all do this in some way. And the Buddha heard about this guy and who was in the forest and said, "Oh, I will go meet him." And they said, "No, he has one more person to kill, and we don't want to lose you." And the Buddha said, "I must meet him." So also like that's a courageous move. So the desire for awakening to meet what is scary is also in the story, and so being played by the Buddha.
mm,
And so like there's also the desire to be of service and to meet what feels unmeetable,
mm.
which, for me in this time and probably in every time, it feels so important
Gosh, yeah.
and radical, meaning like really to the root of things. Like I have to meet what is, I feel like I can't meet.
Mm,
And so he goes and he finds Angulimala, and Angulimala starts to chase him and said like, "Oh, you're my last one." And the Buddha just starts walking away in very slow, what we call kinhin or walking meditation. And Angulimala is running as fast as he can and he can't catch him. And so that's a really beautiful image for me about two different kinds of desire,
mm,
right? The desire for practice, the desire for being nowhere else, to be in the time of our life, which also was Carl Jung, the great psychologist. He felt that also our main work is to be in the time of our life, just like kind of Dogen is saying in a slightly different way, being time as
mm,
opposed to being in the time of your life. And so Shakyamuni Buddha is in the time of his life, and Angulimala is trying to chase him, but it's not. He's in like what will happen after. And so he can't catch the Buddha. And he's like, "Why won't you stop?" He screamed at the Buddha. And the Buddha turned around and said, "Angulimala, I stopped long ago. When will you stop?"
mm, mm,
And there's something about the question. And for me, it's also the desire to awaken bodhicitta, or the kind of the bodhisattva spirit in Angulimala, in this person that many people could think of as evil. But seeing the goodness in him, that's a desire. So Shakyamuni Buddha is also showing us that it's also desire can be to be of service to others and to remind them of who they really are.
mm,
And Angulimala is so shaken by that, saying, just stop. When will you stop? And so this is very similar to the student I was meeting with earlier today about like, we were talking about like, when are we finally going to stop? Stop being just run around by like this, repetitive pattern of what we think of as desire, which is really just the wheel of suffering. And I think that very often, at least in my own experience, like the wheel of suffering can look like desire. And I feel like that's also where, like in the Odyssey, they go to the land of the lotus eaters and they're like, they think that they're having the greatest time, but they're just in a dream and they're just eating these lotus, whatever they were, and just getting lost in time.
Mm,
And I feel like that is the amazing thing that we have to keep seeing. It's like, am I actually here? Am I actually in my life? Am I in the time of my life right now?
mm,
Or am I transposing this quality of what I wished was happening? It's like my friend Bob Waldinger often is quoting this great research, people who actually practice kind of a gratitude practice tend to be happier.
mm.
So it's like in the Jewish tradition, the Modeh morning practice, which I've been doing for many, many years. And it's just about that really learning how to, even before you open your eyes, like what are the five things that you are grateful for?
Mm.
And actually, it's very interesting. He was writing about this and that people who do that right before bed actually sleep better.
Yeah.
And that actually, to me, it's also a way of right sizing desire. Because also we can have the desire to enjoy what we have. The beauty of like, my goodness, we have such a rich life. What more is needed? Like it's almost like everything else is, as Raymond Carver in his beautiful last poem, says, what else could you want in this life?
Mm, mm.
Mhm.
Wow. I think you just laid out so many pieces. I want to just highlight a few of them because they're so beautiful, some of the things that you're saying. So, in the story,
Mhm.
um, what's his name?
Angulimala.
Angulimala.
Anguli means finger, and mala is garland. So,
He had to own that. Only Angulimala. By the way, when I read this story in your book, I immediately had to put down the book and talk to my husband and you have to hear this. It is so, and the way you told it is so powerful, especially for those of us, I think, maybe everyone, but especially those of us that can see the people pleasing tendency within ourselves, the desire to please, to be loved, to be special that he had for his teacher, which I think just hits very home for me. And I love how you kind of talk about this is a desire that has lost its roots, like it's off there outside of him. It like the only way it can be fulfilled is by someone else, his teacher, giving him this outer sense of satisfaction. And then, as you said, losing touch with what he knows to be true and what he
is wisdom.
really
Yeah.
knows. Yeah. And how much suffering we cause
Yeah.
when that is the case, which it is all the time. And then this return back. I love how you're also putting the Buddha as having desire as well, because I don't think you
Definitely.
normally see that as part of the story. It seems like the Buddha just kind of wanders around just perfectly, I don't know, just wise, but of course there has to be some desire that is rooted, that is connected. that motivates him to do these things. And so I just want to also highlight that rooted, motivated desire is so, it is the healing, it's the medicine for the world, as opposed to the ailment. And then I just want to also say this idea of being time, of that kind of, I'm saying rooted, but you're kind of putting this place of like, mm, can you actually say just a little bit more about what that would feel like for those that might not know? What does it mean to be in your time of your life, or to be time, do you think, in the way that Dogen and Jung are talking about it?
I'm just with you.
Mm.
Yeah, El Shai.
Mm.
And to me, it's like it's so simple. Just think about, like, this is something I learned from my grandmother. Like, she was like one of those people, like, when you're with her, she was with no one else. And she would remember, and you could feel her curiosity and wonder about you because she was nowhere else. And so I feel that to be in your time, I think all of us actually know what that's like when what's it been like, even if you had it for 1 minute, that the person is actually with you and nowhere else,
Mm.
that you're feeling like you're actually being received. So I like to reflect on that in terms of relationality, because as we know, we can get so lonely and think that, like, oh, I alone am the worst, which is like the weirdest form of narcissism, and which is very popular, and all of us can fall into that. And so I think it's just really important to remember, like, how do I become the person who can receive others? Like, some of us feel like we don't really have friends. It's like, well, I'm going to learn how to be a friend.
Mm.
I'm going to be the kind of friend who shows up and I'm nowhere else. So I can be a harbor and a weir for others and myself. So to including ourselves. But it's like, kind of, actually, Dogen talks about that image of, taking care of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, of awakening, of the teachings, and of community, that in order to maintain that, you have to be a harbor and a weir, which, and a weir is a place where fish put their eggs, like, kind of like a safe, kind of like a little fish harbor.
Like a little
Yeah,
cave.
yeah, yeah. Or like a ship will come into harbor to be safe in the storm. So, like, for me to really maintain the integrity of our life, and to be in the time of our life, and to be able to reflect on desire, like, oh, is this what is wise?
Mm.
Is this compassionate to myself and others? In order to do that, we have to learn how to be a harbor and a weir in ourselves, right? And so that we can be more in the world
And we're not swept away.
and in the time of our life.
Mm.
It's like that poem that was referencing, from Raymond Carver, his last poem, where it's called Late Fragment. It says, "Did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth."
Mm.
So simple. And this is a man who was quite tortured, and, had so many experiences, and getting sober and all the different things, and to really learning to go through the fire
And
so that we can just simply just be on the ground.
mm, mm. To feel myself beloved on the earth. Is that the line? Beautiful. So, as we're closing this beautiful conversation, can you offer everyone a little practice,
Mm.
something that they can take with them or an intention to help them feel that sense of belovedness?
Well, let's just take a moment to sit. So for me, the sitting practice of zazen, I like to think of it as I was referring to earlier, just like really feeling the ground.
Mm.
So taking a moment, if you're sitting in a chair or you're standing or whatever you're doing, or sitting on the floor, taking that time to actually experience that ground. So this is a wonderful practice of being time. So not experiencing what you wish was happening, what wasn't happening, and then putting your hands on your lower belly just below your belly button and see if you can experience your breath entering and leaving your body from that space. In Zen, we call it the hara. And just feeling the flow of breath. And for many of us, that's a very confusing place because many of us are not so in our bodies, which to me is also part of being in time. It's like, oh, I have a body. And then just taking a moment to open your shoulders, even a tiny bit, like even a millimeter, so that we can be the posture of ground, soft and flowing and open. And then also, once you're a little bit open, bringing your attention up through the vertebrae and up through the crown of your head so that you're upright. So you can be, how can you be more here, right where you are? And the uprightness is also like, how could you be a bit more upright in your mind? Like, can I actually just not feed my distractions and be here with you? So just learning to come back throughout the day to grounded, soft and flowing, open and upright, to me is a powerful and wonderful practice to be in the time of our life, to create the conditions where we can actually get curious about what is wise and what is compassionate. And how do I discern what kind of desire this is? And to be just curious and caring and loving.
Thank you so much, Koshin.
Thank you so much, Yael Shai.
Absolutely beautiful. And thank you, everyone, for watching. See you next time.